I've mowed them, I've weed eated them, mowed them twice, weed eated them, and then sprayed them twice. Roundup doesn't kill them.
Okay, I'd like to call the meeting to order, please. Would you all please rise and join me in the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I guess Bertha and I are probably the only ones in the room that can remember when that pledge was changed, huh, Bertha?
I think you can.
Wasn't that the first year of college?
No, I think it was in the third grade or fourth grade.
1876.
Back in the 1800s. Big controversial thing. Okay. Would Rebecca please call the roll?
Director Underhill?
Here.
Director Rutterman?
Here.
Director Davidson?
Here.
Director Siegel?
Here.
I am here. Okay, at this time, I'd like to encourage anybody who's here to make public comments. Members of the public may address the board on any non-agendized item. The public is encouraged to work through staff to place items on the agenda for board consideration, and comments are limited to 3 minutes per person, and we cannot take any action on matters presented in public comment. Anyone for public comment? Stacy's. Take your time. Okay. I would like to consider the consent agenda.
Move for acceptance.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Would you please poll the board?
Director Underhill?
Yes.
Director Rutterman?
Yes.
Director Davidson?
Yes.
Director Siegel?
Yes.
President Thomas?
I approve of that. Okay, item number 4 under new business, we have 4A, the presentation regarding total compensation report by Koff and Associates. And Stacy, could you give us this, please?
As the board is aware, we have been working with bargaining units and Koff and Associates to complete a comprehensive total compensation salary survey. It's the first one the district has conducted since 2004, I believe.
Same.
The need for this survey came about in late 2016. We worked with the bargaining units collectively, and then in mid-2018, we started the salary survey efforts with Koff and Associates. Today, we have Georg, who is the CEO of Koff and Associates. He and his senior associate, Susan, we worked with them on the salary survey along with other members of the staff. And Georg is here today to explain the process, the process of the salary survey, and as well as their findings. So with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Good afternoon, honorable board members. It's a pleasure to be here after a little bit of a process and a timeline that extended to present the final report and recommendations of the compensation survey. Stacy, will you help me with the slides?
Yeah.
I'll get a clicker. I can keep moving up.
Okay.
I can grab it. Yeah. Thank you. Sorry about that. Let's see if it works. I'll give you a quick introduction. I think Stacy pretty much already talked a little bit about the history for the survey, then explain the process that we go through when we do total compensation surveys, talk about the results and findings and recommendations, and then would respectfully ask the board to accept our report. The introduction is pretty quick here. As Stacy said, the last time a comprehensive survey like this was done by an outside party was in 2004. We contracted with the district last year to do the survey, and the bulk of the data collection that's included in the survey was done in August and September of last year. Anytime an organization does a project or a process like this, the typical goal is to benchmark your compensation package against an identified labor market, and I'll talk about that in a minute, to understand how you compare to the market and make sure that you as an organization can be competitive as you attract and recruit for talent. So getting right to the process itself. Let's see here. Actually, before I get to the process, I have one slide here that talks a little bit about the various steps that I typically see organizations go through when undergoing a process like this. Most of the time, a market survey is done to get a reference point, to basically understand how the organization compares to a competitive labor market, and create an awareness of where essentially you are compared to that market. And that provides a reference point to the organization, and once that reference point is obtained, then a lot of organizations go through various steps that you see on the slide. One is to have a conversation around how to position the organization compared to the market findings, the market survey findings, to design a compensation structure in terms of just the sheer structure of salary ranges and steps and things of that nature. Then going through a process of placing the organization's positions, or what we call job classifications, within that structure based on the market survey, as well as based on internal considerations that the organization will make. And then finally, determining actual employee pay. So once job classifications are placed into a salary range, then there's another step to the process of determining how people's actual pay should be handled, and how the workforce itself is going to be transitioned over to any kind of new structure that is put in place. Certainly, I understand that there is an internal process that occurs after a study like this is done, because anything related to compensation has to be negotiated. But this is basically, a kind of a breakdown of the steps that I see organizations go through. And then, of course, anything that is implemented needs to be maintained and administered. And Stacey, of course, will be sort of the owner, if you will, of the compensation plan going forward. All right, move to the next slide. So anytime you do a total compensation survey, there are 3 survey elements that we discuss with our client and that we need agreement on before we do any kind of data collection. I'll start at the bottom and move my way up. I have a separate slide on the comparator, regarding the comparator agencies, or a couple of slides actually. One of the components are the benefits. So in addition to the base salaries, we also survey various components of the district's benefits package to get an understanding of how the district compares in those areas. That's why we call it a total compensation survey. The main sort of buckets on the benefit side are things such as retirement and any contributions the organization makes to retirement plans. We also look at cost sharing between what the employer versus what the employee contributes to the retirement plan. The next bucket are all of the insurance plans, so the cost to the agency to fund medical, dental, vision, and other insurance. And then the last sort of bucket are leaves. Those are holidays, vacation, sick leave, administrative leave, and things of that nature.
Georg, can I ask a question at that point? I looked over this material, and it wasn't clear to me whether you gave any consideration to the fact that we offer health benefits for retirees. Does that get factored into your computation?
Yes, we actually did look at that as well, and we looked at, I'll have a slide on that in a couple of minutes that breaks down our findings and what the district's contribution towards funding those types of benefits is compared to the agencies that we surveyed. So
okay, thank you.
Let's see, benchmark classifications. Typically the benchmarking process is a process of looking at an agency's entire list of job classifications and then identifying those that we would expect to be most commonly found at other agencies. So there are about 74 total classifications at the district, and we selected 35 to survey. And the way we go about that is to look at job families and classification series, and then identifying those classifications that will be representatives, or we call them benchmarks, for an entire class series or job family. So one example is that we typically select the journey level from the classification series as the benchmark for the series, because that is what we would expect to be most commonly found. I'll elaborate on that a little bit more as I talk about how we do the actual job matching, because there's a few unique observations that we made about the district structure, so I'll get back to that. But there are 35 classifications that we surveyed. And then when it comes to compare agencies, we can move on to the next slide. This slide gives you a list of the factors that we look at when we determine comparator agencies. So basically determining or identifying organizations that do similar things, that provide similar services that the district does. So we look at the organizational type and structure. We look at size of the organization, so we look at things like number of employees and budgets. Population served is something that we look at as well. Very importantly, of course, we look at services provided because we want to make sure that the agencies we survey actually have comparable jobs to the jobs that you have here at the district. So services provided is something that we pay close attention to, and for this particular study, we looked at water treatment, wastewater treatment, and hydroelectric power as three areas that we focus on. We also, of course, pay attention to the geography of where the organization is located. I tell my clients that in an ideal world, if we could draw a 20-mile circle around the client agency and find 10 to 12 agencies that look exactly like you do, that would be ideal. It very often doesn't happen that way, right? Because especially in a situation such as yourselves, where you are in a somewhat unique geographic location, you are a special district providing quite specialized services. It's not uncommon that we have to go outside of the immediate geography to identify organizations that do similar things that you do. And so we looked at adjacent counties as well to identify agencies that would yield a sufficient number of matches as we went about doing the job matching. And then so geography and cost of living really go hand in hand. Cost of living is something that we also pay attention to. Out of all of these factors, we did an analysis that we then brought back to the district and sat down with the study stakeholders, that being management, employee representation, human resources, to have a discussion as to what that list looked like and what list really made the most sense to survey. And so we made a couple of tweaks. For example, we ended up replacing a couple of the cities that ended up in the analysis based on these factors and replaced them with special districts, because special districts really are going to be the best matches for this type of organization. But it was an iterative process that we went through, including the study stakeholders, to arrive at a list that everybody was able to agree to.
Did CCWD, were we lacking in any prominent factor that you consider? Is there something that we should put in that you need or that you would suggest?
I wouldn't necessarily say lacking. It's just our observation was that, and I will honestly say that's often an observation when I work with special districts. Special districts really are special, and what you do is quite specialized. And you know, if I do a survey like this, let's say in, I'm just going to randomly pick Orange County or the greater, you know, the Southern California, where I'm looking at an urban area, it's much more likely that there's a sufficient number of agencies within the immediate geography of our client agency, because of the sheer fact that there are just more agencies serving a larger population. Anytime you move a little bit further away from an urban area, you're going to find that the special district you're working with is that much more special, I guess is the best way to put it.
Well, you didn't see a big hole in, you know, comparable agencies, comparable special districts?
I think, I mean, I feel comfortable with the list of agencies that we came up with. We did look at a couple of smaller agencies that are in a closer proximity to the district, but found that they were so small, they might have only had 5 or 6 employees, where we knew we weren't going to find sufficient market data or sufficient matches to the jobs that you have here. So we ended up not including them on the list.
I just heard you say a moment ago that you went through a process of back and forth and determining that some agencies might not be appropriate, so you replace them with others. As I look through this list, you know, and applying this cost of living, median home price and income, the labor market and geography to the general region, it strikes me as odd that you would come up with City of Roseville, County of Sacramento, Sacramento Suburban Water District, South Lake Tahoe. Why not somebody in Mariposa? Why not? I mean, you've got Tuolumne, but in my opinion, these agencies are going to be skewed, you know, seemingly much higher in the total compensation analysis. Tell me why do we see these out of the area dissimilar comparador agencies?
Yeah, I think it was certainly a little bit of a process, to arrive at this list. We did consider agencies that were in geographic areas that might have been more similar, perhaps, to Calaveras, but really found again that some of those agencies were just too small and would have not resulted in sufficient market data. So we had to sort of expand our horizon in that regard, as well as really looking at one of the things that we do take into consideration is which areas, which agencies may draw the same pool of talent
Okay.
as they're recruiting, and who are you realistically competing with? And certainly the draw of the Sacramento region, for example, is something that that the district is experiencing, and so surveying agencies that you potentially might be competing with over talent is something that is a best practice, because it gives you a sense as to, okay, how do we compare to those agencies that may potentially be recruiting talent away from us. That's one aspect. The other aspect is that we did also look at cost of labor. It's a little bit of a different measurement than cost of living. Cost of labor represents basically the wages that employers pay, and in aggregate, that employers pay in a certain geographic region, and have found that the cost of labor in some of these particular communities was not significantly greater or lesser than your community here. So cost of living, it's interesting that cost of living does not always correlate exactly with cost of labor. And cost of labor is something that we do pay attention to.
On this list, I see, it looks like it's in alphabetical order. Is there any credence given to weighting ones that are more similar, giving them more weight on this list of 11 comparator agencies? Is there any consideration given to given the ones that are closely related in all those different aspects? Is that something that's considered, given them weight, and some of them that appear? I mean, if you're going to pick 11, some of them are going to be more closely resemble, and others are going to be less closely resemble.
Yeah, we do actually. There is weight placed on that, and that's part of the analysis that we do when we look at what we end up doing is, for each of the factors that you saw on the last slide, we do an analysis where we compare all of the agencies that we're looking or considering against Calaveras County Water District. And for each factor, we do essentially a ranking or an analysis of how closely each agency compares to your agency. And then by accumulating, or the cumulative effect of looking at all of the factors and then doing a combined aggregate of the various rankings, those agencies that are closest to you, most similar to you, usually end up on top, and we create a list of recommendations that has the most similar agencies at the top, and the ones that are less similar, let's say, are kind of dropping to the bottom. And usually I see that the agencies that are at the bottom is where the conversation comes in about, does it make sense to include this versus another? Maybe, let's say, a city might have gotten into slot number 11 based on our quantitative analysis, and as we then sat down with the stakeholders and had a discussion around that, and looked at, well, that city, it's there because maybe it's more closely located from a geographic perspective, but then looking at the services it provides, we may have realized, well, there's probably not going to be sufficient market data. Let's maybe swap that city out with a special district that came in at number 12, because that district is actually a better match overall for the organization. So that's part of that iterative process that I talked about.
And during that process, did you have an opportunity or to rank these 11 in order of similarity?
Yes, so for each factor we do a ranking, and then all of these rankings are aggregated, basically, or combined to come up with a list of saying, you've got a list of 11 agencies, and the one at the top is going to be the one most similar to the district, and the one up at the bottom of that list is going to be least similar to the district.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
thanks.
I have a couple of questions, if reason. So looking at the criteria, the population, is that the population of the county or the number of people served by that district? And I wasn't here when the 11 agencies were selected, so who selected those, the board?
At one point, we did present the agencies to the board, yes, in August probably, I would say last year. Maybe July, it was
So
part of
who-
the timeframe, and so yes, they
Who
were
made that
presented.
list and brought it to the board? Your company?
Yeah, the list came out of this process that I described. It was based on an initial recommendation that we made, and then discussions with district stakeholders as to what list would make most sense. But I'd say that I think at least 9 out of the 11 agencies came from our original analysis, and that I do remember swapping out a couple based on that.
And then what about that population? So for instance, Calaveras County is 46,000, we serve 12 or 13,000. So in comparison to, say, city of Lodi or Roseville, are those the number of ratepayers is which I think that we should be comparing? Is that what you compared, or something?
Yes, we typically, I'd have to get back to you on the exact numbers, but typically the way we go about it is to look at an agency, and often just at the agency website, because it will tell us this is how many people we serve. It's usually number of ratepayers or number of connections if it's for water services, things of that nature. So if the district doesn't serve the entire county, we'll typically not include the entire county population.
So is there any comparison or percentage given if we're in regards to the cost of living, wages, or the average wage based on area cost of living?
We did look at that as one of the factors, and that was included in this analysis, and so that's where an agency with a higher cost of living may potentially drop further to the bottom of that list of 11 because of that one factor. The way we do the analysis, though, is that no one factor alone determines the outcome, which is why we look at various factors of similarity or comparability. That's one aspect. The other aspect, again, is that we did also look at cost of labor in each area, and typically we would apply a geographic adjustment factor to agencies that are more than 5% different in terms of cost of labor. We didn't find that in this case, and so we did not make any adjustments to the data. We just reported out what the straight data was from each agency.
What criteria was in the cost of labor? Current benefits, current wages, or was cost of living put in there? What'd you use to determine what cost of labor was?
Yeah, cost of labor is basically defined by the cost of wages that, or the types of wages that all employers in a certain geographic area pay their workforce.
It's not a
And
district.
we-
Yeah, it's, first it'd be like, whatever the tax rate is for this area,
Right, but
benefits.
it's all employees of all different types,
Right.
not just
Oh, okay.
water agencies.
And the reason we look at that is because it's a more, in our estimation, it's a more reliable factor in terms of what an employer has control over, that being wages, versus overall cost of living, because of course that includes the price of bread, butter, and milk, as well as, oil and gas and housing. And so there are factors in the overall cost of living analysis that an employer itself doesn't really have control over. So we feel the cost of labor is a more reliable factor when we look at data and differences in geographic locations.
Okay, so what you're saying is that in this list of comparator,
Comparatives, yeah.
yeah, okay, we are most comparable to amateur water agency.
That's alphabetical.
It may actually have to come out at the top. I don't have that list in front of me now.
Okay, excuse me, it is alphabetical, sorry.
It's an alphabetic list.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
It's not necessarily the case, but I do remember
Uh-huh.
that amateur water agency came up quite close in our analysis. and
Uh-huh.
ranked,
And so is
towards the
that
top.
listed anywhere? The ranking?
It's not listed in this presentation. I don't think it's listed in the report either. I think we just provided an alphabetic listing, but it's certainly something we could provide to the board.
I think,
I'd like to
definitely
see
would like to
that.
yeah, I think we would be
List of how they
interested.
ranked in comparison to CCWD.
Sure. Any other questions regarding the list of comparative? I'll move right along then to the next slide, thank you. So once we have those three survey elements determined, again, that's the compare agencies, the benchmark classifications, and the survey, the benefit survey elements, then it's just a matter of going out and doing the actual data collection and the job matching. And that's a quite involved process that requires a lot of analysis of looking at actual job descriptions at each agency, not just job titles, but really looking at the body of work, the duties and responsibilities, the required qualifications that include knowledge, skills, abilities, education, training, certifications, number of years of experience, basically all of the components of the job, and making a judgment call to say, when I look at two job descriptions, we're looking for at least a 70% match. We can all agree that no two agencies are going to be 100% the same, no two jobs are going to be 100% the same. We strive for at least a 70% match when we compare two jobs, to include that particular data point in our analysis. And there's also a lot of follow-up with each agency that we survey to make sure we understand their classification structures, their compensation structures, and get all of our questions answered in the process.
With that said, you did contact that list of 11, you did contact each of those 11 agencies and got detailed information about their job descriptions from them?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, typically, for the most part, what we do is we look at the agency's website first. Of course, a lot of agencies have most of their information posted.
Okay.
But it then always requires some follow-up with an expert or subject matter expert at each agency to confirm that the information on their website is accurate and current. Sometimes we have questions about job description. Sometimes we have questions about how compensation structures are managed or administered. Many of our questions are often related to the benefits detail that we collect, because we get into quite a bit of detail when it comes to the dollars and cents that we report to you all. So we always want to make sure that what we're reporting is as accurate as possible.
And what did you experience as far as cooperation in that process? I know in dealing with us, you're getting paid. We're giving you as much information as we can and spending a lot of time. And I'm sure that Stacy, as well as other employees, have done that. Did you get cooperation from these other 11 districts?
We did. I will say
And why? Why would they cooperate?
It's a good question. One reason really is that this is a very common practice in the public sector, is to do periodic salary surveys. And most HR professionals consider it as part of their job, really, just to respond to surveys and provide their colleagues, whether it's a consultant representing their colleague or a colleague themselves, to provide that information. A lot of times, of course, they're going to be, come the following year or a couple of years down the line, they might be in the same boat and they're going to do their own survey. And because the information is public information, there really is a requirement by each agency to provide the information that we request. It's not always as easy as it sounds, I will say that too. Sometimes you have to, it's like pulling teeth a little bit, but for the most part, I couldn't tell you now whether there was any agency where we had a harder time getting information, but in the end, we got information from all of them.
And Stacy, in your experience here, how often does that happen to you that someone, either a professional or another agency, comes to you for this type of information?
Very often,
Oh,
if
okay.
not weekly.
Okay,
Oh.
all right.
Because every agency wants to remain competitive, and so you've got to know what's out there on the market.
And it's not even, it's beyond even compensation. I know, like I have a really good relationship with TUD and AWA, and we share a lot of information back and forth because it's just helpful.
All right, thanks.
One of the aspects about the job match we wanted to talk about is that one of the observations that we had about the district's classification structure is that that there are multiple levels in some classification series, such as, for example, accounting technician 1, 2, and senior, or some classification series that the district have 4 levels, let's say a 1, 2, 3, and a senior, where in some of the other agencies we surveyed, we found that not every agency has the same number of levels. And so matching the correct level to the benchmark that we identified here was sometimes a little bit challenging. That was one observation. Another observation certainly was that most, if not actually, no agency that we surveyed requires triple certifications of their workforce. And so matching certification for certification is almost impossible because of the unique situation that you all are in terms of how work is assigned and what is required of your workforce in terms of training and certifications. And so again, we strive to hit that 70% match as closely as possible. I will say, I'll be the first one to tell you that no, there is no perfect survey. All you can do is get as close as possible, look for similarities, look for comparability when you're looking at the body of work as well as the qualifications that are required. It's never going to be exact, but it was certainly an observation that we had, a couple of observations about how your agency is quite unique even compared to other special districts. That said, we did end up with results. For the most part, most benchmarks we surveyed provided us with sufficient market data, and this slide gives you a very high-level summary of what we found, and that is that by looking at all of the base salaries of the district, when taking an average, you're pretty much right at market. Being 0.7% below median, we would consider to be pretty much at market. Now, of course, there's the devil's in the details, as they say, in breaking down that data down and looking at each benchmark we surveyed. We did find results that were quite varied. So you'll see a range in the report from classifications that were above market to some that were below market, and the second bullet point gives you that range, so from 16.5% above to 10.9% below. So quite a bit of a spread and a range. I will say it's not uncommon to find this, to get this kind of result when a formal survey like this hasn't been done in a long time. It's quite common that I see these kinds of results in a lot of the surveys.
But how did you come up with the overall number?
The overall number is arrived by looking at, that's actually a really good question, by looking at, for base salaries, what we survey, or the point of comparison that we select, is the top of the salary range at each agency. We feel that gives us the best point of comparison, the best apples-to-apples comparison, because in most agencies, employees move to the top of the range within a certain time frame, and that also represents the highest earning potential at that agency. whereas the bottom of the range, for example, or even the middle of the range, are not as reliable because every agency structures its ranges differently. But the top of the range gives us a good apples-to-apples comparison. So the data you're looking at represent top pay at each agency, and then the market median is derived by looking at all of the data points for each benchmark. Let's say again, looking at the accounting technician 2, which is one of our benchmarks. In fact, there's a number of data points that we have. I think I have it right here, if I just take a quick look. I think there were 9 data points that we were able to identify for that particular benchmark. And the median is arrived by looking at, by just taking the median of those 9 data points. The market median is the data point that's the exact midpoint of any set of data that you have. Where 50% of your data is going to be higher and 50% of your data is going to be lower.
Well, but higher is higher just the standard? Is it 0.1 higher? Or do we actually take the, we got 4%, 14.4, 17.5, 5.2, 7.3. These are all above. 0.4, 14.9, 8.3, 12.2. I haven't gotten into any negatives yet. And I just got to the negative, which is 2.6. There's another positive, there's another positive, there's another positive, there's another negative at 6.7. My point is, the positives many of them are in double digits, and the negatives, so is it just higher or lower? Or is the average percentage being accounted for?
It is, the positive percentages represent a result where the current salary range of that particular job classification is above market. So
you don't care how high above market, you just care that it's above market.
Right, we compare the districts.
And that's troubling. I mean, to me, I mean, maybe I'm not understanding, but I'm looking at high percentage numbers here that we got people, or classifications, whatever they are, at almost 15% over, and we've got and then the unders are in the 3.3%. So, I mean, are we getting an accurate look just by saying we have some higher and some lower? 4.1% is higher, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, well, the results you're looking at are basically just a mathematical calculation. By looking at a set of data, again, if we're looking at the accounting technician, for example, we've identified 9.
But do you agree it would be more accurate if we actually were using the percentages?
I'm not sure.
The average percentage that's higher. If we took all the ones that were higher and did the average percentage of higher and came up with a number on that, and then the average percentage of the lower, is that a more accurate?
It's certainly that's certainly a cut of the data that we could look at. In bullet point 1, you're looking at the entire aggregate. So it's putting all of the percentages, whether above or below market, together.
I don't see how that's possible.
I'm sorry?
Well, you're saying it's only 0.7?
It's 0.7 because some of the negative percentages, of course, sort of cancel out the positive percentages. So this is really just an aggregate number to look at.
You need to look
Certainly,
line by line, I think.
that's what's important to look at the ratios.
I know, but when you're looking at the 0.7,
No, but I'm looking at
it's
this.
irrelevant. I know, me too. But looking at that 0.7, because like you said, you have the positive and the negative outweighs the positive.
Right.
I don't think it's a good indicator to use what you have up there. I think looking at each classification is where you want to be,
Right.
not
Yeah,
just one number as a whole.
If I can interrupt for 1 second here. This relates to base salary. This relates to total compensation.
Okay.
Yeah, let me keep going if I could, and talk a little bit about total compensation and how that impacts the outcome, and maybe that's somewhat helpful. It's basically the market median numbers are just, again, like I said, it's
I
a
agree with this
mathematical
seems
calculation
quite
that
low
we
when you
simply
sum
use
these.
Excel for. And so we compare the market median and the district's current pay, and that's how we come up with these percentages. So again, positive means that the current pay or the current salary range that we surveyed is above market, and the negative percentage means it's below market.
But just,
When I say
it
market,
doesn't matter how high. Doesn't matter how much. It just matters this, it is or it isn't. It could be 0.1 or 0.1 either way direction.
Well, it certainly matters by how much. It's just by aggregating.
That's not what we're
seeing.
seeing, we're not seeing how much it is, we're just seeing that it is or it isn't on this slide.
On this particular slide,
Okay.
slide,
All right.
yes, right.
I just think that we need to know more about the actual percentages.
Sure, yeah, and I'll get to that in a minute, I hope I'll be able to answer your question. The last bullet point, just, again, this is just a high-level result from the survey, shows that when adding benefits to the equation, the district as a whole moves above market, and that tells us that the district's benefits package is greater than the 11 agencies that we surveyed. And I have slides on that, so that's actually, the next couple slides give you more detail.
I think that the next couple slides is what Director Davidson was
I think so too.
referring
This is-
to.
Right, this is
And I
probably
think,
what.
and he does have a good question, because if you look at that third column, and you go down on this slide and the next slide, there's the positive numbers are much bigger than the negative numbers.
And there are more of them.
And these two slides give you the total compensation survey results. So this is salaries plus benefits. And what you're looking at is, in the left column, of course, is the name of the position surveyed. The next column gives you the number of matches. So this tells you how many of the comparator agencies had a match or had a similar job to the district here. Then the next column gives you the current top of the position salary range. It's important to note that this is not what employees actually get paid, but this is the current official top of the official salary range for that position. And then the next column, the median of comparators, gives you the median from all of the data points that we were able to collect. So again, the first one is actually accountant 2. We've got nine matches, so 9 agencies had a match for that position. The 11,453 is the top of reflects the top of the salary range plus the benefits package.
And not that anybody here is necessarily making that, but that's what they could make and go up to based on our.
Exactly right. There's a little bit more detail I could give you regarding how we find the apples to apples comparison for benefits, where we basically create a prototype employee, and that prototype employee has certain factors we attach to them, such as 5 years of service, employee plus family, things of that nature that again give us an apples to apples comparison from one agency to the next.
Okay.
So those numbers include all of those aspects of that prototype employee. The next column then gives you the median, and then you have the percentage difference between the district's current compensation package and the market median from all of the matches that we found. So again, in this case, nine data points, what we had for the accountant 2. And then we just simply report out what those percentages are. And again, a positive percentage means above market, and negative percentage means below market. Does that make it a little bit more clear? Or?
Well, to me, it makes it insignificant, because it doesn't tell us how much above or below. It just says it's either above or it's below.
Well,
And that's not an accurate measurement. When I'm looking at numbers, when I'm looking at 14 and 17% above market, that's a significant number, and it's a lot more significant than just it is above or it is below. Does that make sense to you, that I think I need more information about what, and really, I mean, I think what we're gonna end up doing is, you know, the numbers are so far spread, you know, I mean, there's a 20% swing in some of these numbers,
Right.
you know? I mean, you know, how do we address that, you know, district-wide? It's gonna be very difficult, so I just, I hope you understand that when I look at this and I see these positive numbers in the double digits and the negative numbers in the single digits, we have 32 employees that are above pay scale and 30 employees that are below pay scale. It doesn't do a lot for me, because I can see here that the ones that are above are greatly above.
Way above.
Right.
So,
It's
let me-
conceivable
if I could
that-
just try to clarify something here, because I think the confusion might be with the 0.7, but the aggregate percent for the total comp is 4.1, not 0.7. So this total comp comparison takes, my understanding is, takes all that, the overs and the unders, takes all that into account, and it came out at 4.1% above the median on average.
But when you're looking at the individual salary classifications and jobs, you have to look at them individually with those.
Definitely.
comparisons.
This is
You can't do
aggregate
this.
data.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I just in my little, pea brain here, when I can't make that 4-point number
So
Yeah,
you're,
I see what
you're,
you're saying.
work out.
you're saying if we took the right-hand column on this, well, first of all, is this slide and the next slide, does that include all of our positions that were surveyed? Okay.
And all, you're right, the right column is basically, we took an aggregate of the right column, that's how we came up with the 4.1%. And the reason we looked at
Aggregate.
that two aggregates. is
Aggregate,
because-
not average, though, aggregate.
Right, and
No.
you look at all the percentages and then you take an average of the percentages. And of course, some of the negatives will cancel out some of the positives, but the reason we look at it in this manner is that this at one glance tells us that the benefits package of this organization has a quite significant impact on total compensation. It actually moves you from being slightly below market, again, as a total organization, to being almost, being 4% above market. So it's an almost 5% impact that your benefits have on total compensation versus base salaries alone.
Yeah.
So basically, we can see these two numbers tell us how much your benefits move the needle in terms of how the district compares to the overall market.
I wonder if you would have taken, like, in this list that you have here, separate the classifications that are positive from the negative, and then in the positive group, get the average, 25% or 10% above, the median, if that would have been something nice to look at, even though the bottom line is, there's major differences on each.
Right,
On a lot of
I'm looking for that place in the narrative report that sort of looks like this. You do have that breakdown on pages 11 and 12 that gives you a little bit of a more broken down analysis. On those pages, you'll find, towards the bottom of page 11, do you all have that in front of you?
I don't think,
I have one, I'll share it with you.
I think we have two of them up here. Or no, we have three.
Well, I think the bottom line, we can keep going forward with this presentation, because ultimately we'll have to decide what's gonna happen at some point anyway.
If I could just say one thing also to take into consideration, for instance, if you look at the customer service representative to comparison, it shows 11.4%. As Georg had mentioned earlier in the presentation, as far as the number of levels that we found in different organizations, that data may be somewhat skewed because it's often found that there's only 3 levels of customer service where the district has 4 levels of customer service. So it's one of the factor of having more levels versus other can skew that data for positions like that where we have more levels than others.
But if you chose the highest possible wage, so as a customer service, you take the highest one, then it shouldn't really skew it that much.
Well, that's the journey level in the customer service representative classification. So we have a rep 1, 2, 3, and lead. And then you have a customer service manager. So you could make the argument that you have 4 to 5 levels versus what is typical is anywhere from 2 to 3 levels.
But again, if you're taking the highest wage possible, which most employees may choose to want to go as high up as they can. So if we're using that as our benchmark, which it sounds like you said we did, we should just use that and not make it a customer service rep too. It should be the customer service supervisor.
Really important distinction though there. What Stacy's talking about is the job classification, which we didn't go to the top end of that range. We went within each classification, they looked at the highest pay within that classification, the highest range within that. So they looked at customer service to the highest range or the highest, pay scale for that classification, but it doesn't mean we were automatically, using the customer service lead as a comparator.
Well, like he also said, there's gonna be a lot of skewing going on in a lot of different areas. It's just kind of a tool to give you an idea of where you're at and make decisions based
if
on
I'm
that
not-
with some plus or minuses.
And if I'm not mistaken, the customer service, there's only one customer service rep, and it was the customer service rep 2 that you were able to use in your analysis because you found 9 other districts and cities that also have that similar position. So that the other ones didn't come into your study because they weren't there. You didn't find enough matches in the 11 districts that we used around the area, correct?
It's basically, that was part of the benchmarking, so the
Okay.
customer service representative 2 was selected as the benchmark for that whole series.
Okay.
And the challenge really was in our matching was to identify which level at each comparator agency was the most appropriate level that compared to the customer service representative 2 at this organization.
Okay.
So that's what Stacy was talking about in terms of the, once we had to identify that benchmark, we try to match to the benchmark as closely as possible. We wouldn't look at any of the higher levels or lower levels to match because we are still, the matching process includes the body of work and other aspects that we consider for the job.
Stacy, on the customer service, we have customer service 1, 2, 3, lead, and then supervisor? Is that right?
Manager.
Manager, okay. And so, from 1 through 4, 1 through 3 and the lead, does each time they move up, they have more responsibilities? Is it more of a step system, or does everyone have more responsibilities in 1 through 3 actually? Because the lead would be more responsibility, I would assume, than the manager, of course. So 1, 2, and 3, is there actually more job duties getting that more pay, or is it more of a step to get raises?
It's more responsibility from 1 through the lead.
I want to bring up, I just tried to do a little math, and just to bring the point of, on the second market findings here, where we start with engineer, we've got 13 in the positive section that if you average that out, it comes to almost 8. We have 13 in the positive number with one at 17, one at 14, but the average is 7.97. We have 3 in the negative, and the average is 4.2 below. So do I make my point?
So,
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, really what the results are telling us is that the district's compensation package is quite competitive compared to the agencies that we surveyed. And so having these positive percentages means exactly that, is that, overall the compensation package comes out greater for many of the positions at the district compared to the survey market that we surveyed. And if we want to move to the next slide, I can tell a little bit more about why that may be, and that is, when looking at benefits in a little bit more detail, we see that one of the factors for this result, or one of the reasons for the result, is that the district's contribution to medical insurance, for example, is about $150 greater than the market average. So again, looking at all of the other 11 agencies and taking an average of what they contribute to medical insurance, and the district's insurance is about $150 greater than that. So that's one aspect about the district's benefits package. Other aspects are that in terms of retirement, for example, in looking at the classic plan, which is the point of comparison that we typically select for our surveys, the district actually in some areas falls a little bit below the market. So there's 10 of the other agencies we surveyed actually have a formula that's greater than what the district's classic plan is. 3 agencies offer single highest year, which is also kind of an additional sort of enhancement that agencies still offer as part of the PERS plan. And at the same time, 3 agencies require employee cost sharing. So those 3 agencies' workforce actually picks up a portion of the employer's contribution into the retirement plan. So that we report that as a negative value So that makes up for some of those other enhancements that other agencies offer. There's some greater formulas on the one hand, but then there is an employee contribution that covers part of the employer's portion of the PERS rate. 3 agencies do not participate in Social Security, so that also brings the aggregate of the market, pulls it down a little bit. However, there are 3 agencies that contribute to a deferred compensation plan. It's not the same 3 agencies, but that again makes up for a little bit of the shortfall in Social Security. So you see that in overall the retirement plans in the survey are a little bit of a mixed bag. It doesn't look like the district's falling significantly above or below the market for retirement. So medical insurance is one. The leave benefits is the other bucket where the district has a greater benefit. And this is a little bit of a tricky one. The way that we look at benefits and what we report are those benefits that we consider to be an automatic number that people earn. And that's how we report vacation or paid time off. When an agency offers paid time off versus a separate vacation and a separate sick leave policy, we report the entire number of days or hours that the agency provides to employees, because PTO, paid time off, is handled just like vacation. It is something that employees earn and have to be paid for, versus sick leave is something that is accrued but not earned. So sick leave is more of a use it or lose it type of a benefit, even though certainly some agencies have sick leave buyback or cash out policies, but technically sick leave, legally speaking, is not a benefit that is earned. So when an employee separates, for example, they have to be paid for any accrued vacation or PTO, because again, that's earned, whereas they may lose whatever sick leave they've accrued, unless of course there's some kind of an agreement that says otherwise. But legally speaking, sick leave is not a guaranteed benefit. So we make a distinction between those two, and that's why the district's benefits package in this area is quite a bit greater than the market, because the district rolls all of the days into an earned program.
They don't have a separate sick pay. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah. And the other thing is the union employees, do they have the same benefits as a confidential management bargaining unit? Are they, do they have the exact same? Well, I kind of asked, are they the same, like, do they earn the same vacation and paid time?
There are many of the benefits are the same between management confidential and union.
How about the paid time off?
Yes.
They're the same? Okay.
All right, we're ready for the next slide. So this is an answer to the question President Thomas, you asked earlier regarding retiree medical insurance. The district certainly has a quite generous program there compared to other agencies. In fact, Stacey asked us to look into that in a little bit more detail, and what we could find is that 3 of the 11 agencies have a similar program. The others most likely don't. I say most likely because there's a few agencies that we weren't able to get that detail from. But what this slide tells you is that 9 agencies have some type of retiree medical plan. Now, like I said, some provide a similar plan that the district does. Others simply put some funds into a health savings account, for example, or they pay the minimum required by PEMCA, which is the law that governs this type of benefit, which is a much, much lesser benefit than what the district is offering. And so, again, when we look at how each agency funds that future liability of OPEB and how much they pay into it, the market average again 6.6%, but you again see quite a bit of a range. So I know that looking at the range is often more telling than looking at an aggregate. But being statistics people that we are, we do look at a lot of aggregates. But the range tells you that agencies that pay 23% of payroll to fund their OPEB liabilities, they're going to have a pretty robust benefit, whereas an agency that only pays at 1.4% may have a less robust benefit, or they may have done a better job funding their OPEB liabilities. So, this doesn't tell us exactly how each agency handles or has handled their OPEB liabilities, but again, we're just reporting out the numbers here. What we did find, though, is that your agency's contribution was a little bit higher than, again, looking at the aggregate of the market. So another area where, numbers can show you, at least give you a little bit of information as to how you compare to the market and whether you're higher or lower. Does that help?
Yes.
Great. Great. Well, really the last part of the presentation is just to talk a little bit about recommendations, and certainly what you're going to find in the report are our recommendations as the consultant. And as a consultant, we try to stay as neutral as possible in this process. So the way that we use these positive and negative percentages that you were looking at earlier is that for each position, for each job classification, if we were to recommend a salary range, we actually look at these positive and negative percentages, and we might say that for those positions that are above the market median, the district should technically adjust the salary range downwards for that position. We're not talking about the employees, that's a separate issue. We're just saying that based on the market findings, an above market outcome would tell us that the district should lower the salary range, whereas a negative percentage, meaning a below market outcome, we would recommend increasing that salary range for those positions. And that's really what you're seeing in the result. The next, I think, 3 slides, and it's probably gonna.
So is this a snapshot as of today? I mean, because or is there any cost of living that's built into this these recommendations, or is it a number that's just there today?
It's a very good question, actually. These numbers you're looking at are actually 2018 numbers, because that's when we did the data collection.
So that would all that would do is square up last year.
Right, exactly. This gives you the picture as of, I believe, September or October of last year. If there have been any changes in benefits or cost of living adjustment at your or any of the other agencies, that's not reflected here.
Okay.
And if you look at the detailed spreadsheets in the report, it will tell you the effective date of the salaries that we're reporting. I will say that most salaries are good through June 30th of this year. Certainly we're now in August, so many agencies most likely did implement some changes. We are seeing quite a lot of cost of living adjustments these days that agencies are implementing. But these numbers, again, reflect fall 2018 numbers. The last thought I'll share with you is that again, these salary range recommendations are our neutral way of looking at things. Obviously, there's an internal process of negotiating how the district will use the survey and what kind of compensation structure you will all implement. But this gives you a little bit of a roadmap. I will also say that when you're looking at the adjustment, the percentage of the adjustment in a range, let's say we're saying that a range should be adjusted up or down, for that matter, by 10%. We're not saying that the employee within that position would immediately receive a 10% increase. If it goes this direction, if it goes the other direction, we find that if agencies lower any salary ranges, it's been my experience that employees within that position typically would be what we call lighter-weighted, or their salary would be frozen until such time as the market catches up with their current salary.
And so you've talked to each and every one of them, and they're okay with that?
I will say the hardest job in all of this is really on Stacy and all of you. And
I really appreciate you doing that.
we have, comparatively, our job is pretty easy, even though this is a complex process, but our job really is now, I suppose.
Georg, I certainly want to give you my assurances that none of these questions were intended to question your abilities or your background or the degree of hard work that went into this. It was just, many of us here are just contractors, so we have to.
We're simple folks.
We have to, when something isn't crystal clear, we have to ask questions, so.
Absolutely, I appreciate you saying that.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
But we're supposed to,
All questions are good questions, so
we're supposed to make an action on this today, but I'm
It's just, I
afraid.
think it's just
We just
accepting.
accept it, and I think that's fine. I'll make a motion to accept.
Well, wait a minute, I'm not through.
She can make a motion.
The thing that is,
First one I ever made.
the thing that is you're out of order. The thing that is absent here is that there's no survey on the board of directors compensation.
You thief.
So can we fix that? No, just, you can make your motion now. so.
Are you sure? Any public comment, or is that out?
And there's actually no action agenda on this. It's just a presentation from.
My last question, your
don't
your
let that
name
stop you from making
is spelled, your first
Oh,
name
okay, I was reading the second.
is spelled,
without the E at the end, right. And it pronounced Georg, which is the German version of the name.
Sound of Music.
That's, thank you for your. Yes, and I was born and raised in
Absolutely,
Austria, so I am also Austrian.
That's awesome.
Well,
How do you spell that?
It's just Georg, just like George, except there's no E on the end. That's the only difference. So
Okay.
I get that question a lot, and if you forget the E at the end of your name.
the only reason,
Favorite movie?
the only reason that I know that is I was Captain Von Trapp for 22 performances, so
Oh, see?
Georg,
Seen all
so.
the songs.
Most people will get that name. Yeah, Captain Fantastic.
Okay,
So I just have a comment on now, in relation to my comments, are we gonna see anything that has more detail that actually talks about, the percentages? I mean, cause the 4-point thing, that doesn't fly. When you've got so many that are above and below, I mean, honestly, if we looked at average compensation above, we're way up there. If you're actually looking at, cause there's 20 employees that are above and there's 7 or 8 that are below. So just because those averages come to 4 something, doesn't mean that we're only 4%.
So can I just, maybe it'd be helpful if we just clarify how you got to that number? So did you just add those columns of our total comp and the median comp, and then take the average or the percentage of the difference?
It's basically looking at all of the percentages, the ones that are above and the ones that are below from that column on the right, that earlier slide, and we're taking an average of all of those. And the 4.1% is the aggregate of all of the total compensation survey results. So certainly if you have percentages that are positive, such as 14, 17%, and on the other side you have percentages like -4 or 5%, they will cancel each other
No, but let me-
a little bit, but not entirely.
But let me make this, I just did this, there's 13 on the positive column on the market findings with the engineer. 13 of them are on the positive, an average of 7.97. There are 4 on the negative. And so, I mean, when you do it's 8 and it's 4, it gets close to the 4 number, but my point is, there's 13 positives and 4 negatives.
well,
So-
Jeff, if you take the graph, the previous slide, and add those to your calculations, it's probably gonna come out to that 4 point.
No, it came to 4 point, it's the same, all the lower numbers, it came to 6.78 was the positive and 2 was the low, so it comes to 4.7, but once again, there's 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, I mean, they're actually more equal there, there's like 7 and 1, 2, 3, 7 positive. I think it's 7 and 7, so that's actually,
But
makes
Jeff,
more sense, but
I
it's the next
think-
page.
I think for his presentation, he wanted to give you an idea. Are you higher or lower altogether? And I think in most areas we're higher.
I understand what they did. I'm trying to let the board understand that it's a much greater percentage of.
Yes, I think we see that. I do.
I gathered that.
Well, when you look at the line by lines, yeah.
And to answer your first question, the data is in the final
Okay.
report, right? So you have a copy of that.
Which I do.
Do you have this report?
Yep.
I
It's at home, but then.
wish to thank you for a very thorough follow-up on the study.
And if I could, I would like to acknowledge Stacy and all of the employee representatives who all worked very, very hard to get us to this point. So we couldn't do this work without all of them, so we appreciate that.
No, I thank you both, and I thank all the other agencies that have helped us by working with you, and that, is-
And
And we will send thank you letters on all of our behalf to each agency, thanking them
Okay.
for participating in the survey.
the only thing that you're going to send us is the list of the 11 agencies in the order.
and an invoice probably.
Yes, yeah, we can
Okay.
follow up with that, sure.
Thank you.
We work on-
President Thomas, if I might, I would just like to echo the gratitude for COF, but also for staff that really did put a tremendous amount of work into this, and most of it was before my time here. And that's not just, Stacy obviously did a huge amount of work here, but our union leadership had a committee that was dedicated to this process that also put a lot of work into it. It was through very, different levels of the organization that contributed to this. And I think the final product is something that we can use as a good reference point. So much appreciated effort.
I agree. Okay, any other comments on this item? If not, let's move on to 4B. This is,
Thank you.
Thank you very
thank
much.
you.
Really good.
Discussion, and then I was reading the wrong line to action regarding the acceptance of the final completion of the Jenny Lind Water Plant Treatment Project, CIP number 11092. Mr. Palmer.
Sure.
So this is in regards to the Jenny Lind pre-treatment project that's been funded by Cali FEMA. After, we'll get to the timeline here. So this project, this key points, the project was initiated after the Butte fire. And the intent was to provide a pre-treatment system that would help remove turbidity and organics that were impacting the raw water from Butte Reservoir in the watershed. We entered into a contract with the R.E. Smith Construction in December of 2017, and we essentially finished construction as of August 15th. There are a few minor punch list items, which if anyone has any questions about those, I can detail those out. And our deadline in California's completion date is September 30th, 2019, so in the next month. So we did ask for an extension on that time, so, I did have an opportunity to kind of extend that out to that date.
Well, Charles, a quick question I have is with the extra cost totaling 431,000,
Go ahead.
it brings it out askew where it's no longer a 75% grant. It's just going to be somewhat less, and we're picking up a little bit more than 25%. Is there ever an opportunity to go back to Cal EOS with the new revised numbers, the actual numbers, and get and square up that 75 and 25%?
We did that once already.
Right.
And we did a substantial.
And did they say don't do it again, or can we now do it?
They didn't say do it. I would be a little leery of the fact, that we did have a settlement that went on. So, I don't know how to see that, and I don't know what the implications.
The settlement of, I'm sorry.
With PG&E.
Oh, I see.
So.
Okay.
Because those, I don't want to get too far into that, but.
Okay.
That might be a consideration.
All right.
Just on the environmental costs, those are over costs?
sorry, we're just having a little problem here with the usual normal. There, okay. So that was the project budget, and just on your slide.
What's entailed in the environmental, now that was a part of the original budget or additional?
That was so that included costs prior to construction and during construction.
Okay, what I'm getting at is, was any of that due to the holdup on, for the artifacts?
Right.
Okay, how much and at what level?
I would say 75% of it.
So 75% of, so we're looking at about 280 grand?
Right.
That was, and who was that paid to?
That is paid to
Garcia.
Garcia and Associates and as a sub to Garcia and
Right.
Associates, the local tribe.
And do we have any breakdown of that?
Yeah, we can get that.
Okay.
Yeah, so basically what we wanted to do today was just be able to accept the project as
Gravy
complete.
train. Gravy train clause.
I did have a picture of it there, sorry, it's a beautiful project.
So you need a motion for acceptance? I'll move for acceptance.
Right, yes.
Second.
I wanted to hear more.
Don't you have a meeting to go to at 7:30 tonight or something?
Yeah,
See,
okay,
the
we
rest
have,
of the meeting.
we have a motion and a second. Do we have any public comment on this item? Seeing none, would you please poll the board?
Director Underhill?
Yes.
Director Letterman?
Yes.
Director Davidson?
Yes.
Director Seaman?
Yes.
President Thomas?
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you. Good job, Charles.
Fabulous report. Okay, I'm gonna, seeing that Peter is not here, let's take a 5-minute break, please.
He's right.
He's not far away, but
You moved. Why did you do that, Peter?
Yes, yes, yes. On that.
Now that Peter is back in the room,
he's pretty slippery.
we have an update on actions on the East Side Groundwater Sustainability Agency and JPA, and a musical presentation.
Sure. So it's been a while since I provided an update, but these are part of our routine updates on the progress of the groundwater sustainability plan and activities of the GSA and the Groundwater Authority. I always like to start with this slide, making progress. The star is now in the public review cycle, which actually the public comment for the draft groundwater sustainability plan closed on Sunday. It was an odd day to close a comment period, but they were really strict about their 45-day window, I think. So just wanted to kind of highlight some of the things that have happened this month. Still is August. And so the full draft was available from July 10th through August 25th for the close of that comment period. And the comments were due on the 25th. I'll talk a little bit more about the comments received at the end of the presentation as well. So essentially, Sigma has a set of chapters and things that have to go into every groundwater sustainability plan. Those are set up by these 7 chapters. I think we've kind of talked about these before, but these are elements that were absolutely required as part of the plan. There was an informational meeting that was held on July 18th. Actually had some better attendance than they have in the past. This was the 4th of 4 informational meetings they agreed to host throughout the basin during this process. This was kind of the official kickoff for the opening of the public comment period on that groundwater sustainability plan. There were additional outreach opportunities that continued, including at the McCalling River Association. I believe President Thomas and Director Ratterman were in attendance at that meeting. Walt Ward gave that presentation, and it was actually quite a few quite a few questions, actually, which is interesting because a lot of the folks that are in the McCollum River Association attendees are 2 years behind us, so they're kind of looking over our shoulder. And also, there has to be some coordination between those plans and the plan that's being proposed right now. So just an update on the plan manager. Brandon Nakagawa, who was the former water resources manager for San Joaquin County, he went to go to work for South San Joaquin Irrigation District, and as a result, they needed to reassign a plan manager. The county's been acting in that capacity, which is a requirement of a groundwater sustainability plan development, and so they redelegated it to the Public Works Director for San Joaquin County. So San Joaquin County continues serving in that role. It's just a matter of who's receiving correspondence. There was an ad hoc committee formation, which is very interesting. We had a participant from the East Side GSA, Mr. Walt Ward from Stanislaus County, who was a part of this. This work is mostly focused on what's next. So when the Groundwater Authority and the Joint Powers Authority were created, there was kind of a singular mission. It was all these groundwater sustainability agencies are going to work together and develop one plan. So we're getting towards the end of that. What else is this entity going to do going forward? And so a lot of the discussion is centered around required monitoring requirements for the plan long-term, administration of the plan. So there's going to be check-ins, there's going to be reports that are due routinely for the next 20-year planning horizon. Who's going to do that? And unfortunately, you got to talk a little bit about the costs. So we haven't really got there yet, but a lot of what's being discussed is what are the individual GSAs going to do, and what is going to be the responsibility of the JPA going forward. So.
Will we have a voice at that table when that's discussed? I know that we were assessed a pro rata share of the foundational cost, but the going forward cost, I mean, if our bucket of contribution, either taking water out or putting the water in, is a cup full compared to tankers full on others, I don't see how we could be charged the same.
Yeah, I anticipate a robust conversation on that. If you remember some time ago when we first were going down this road about cost sharing for the groundwater sustainability plan, there were several approaches, some based on water usage, some based on land usage. They had actually gone as far as to create a hybrid approach of those two to try to create some sort of balance there. But there's other agencies that are like us too that have a lot of large land area. But perhaps maybe not as much water use. Linden, on the other hand, is the opposite, very tiny little postage stamp, take a lot of water. Some others, or I guess actually I take that back, it's not Linden, Linden does too, and then also Lockford is kind of a similar situation. So somebody's gonna have to find something that approach that makes sense and doesn't have folks being burdened unnecessarily. So I expect a lot of conversation on that at the board level. So
Were the representatives from Linden and Lockford the same people who were there in the beginning?
yeah. So that this again, this
Yeah.
conversation. Ultimately, things change really rapidly when the Zone 2 funds came into play. If you remember correctly, Zone 2 is an assessment in San Joaquin County that the flood control district assesses on a per parcel basis. That money came in and fed a portion of the plan. Unfortunately, Eastside GSA, Stanislaus, and Calaveras counties don't pay into that, so we ended up paying a larger share of the total cost. But in the end, we benefited from that cost share. So going forward, so I don't know if Zone 2 is going to continue to fund portions of what's going on in San Joaquin County. So that has to be part of the discussion as well. Again, when it comes to monitoring, I don't anticipate it's going to be particularly burdensome from the beginning. Right now, the district, for instance, have a contract with a firm to go do semi-annual monitoring in our 11 wells in the CASGEM program. That is about anywhere from $3,500 to, well, I'd say $3,500. It fluctuates. Sometimes we've had to do some repairs on some of our wells and rehab and things like that. So, you know, if you apply that across the basin and maybe you go to more like quarterly monitoring or something like that, I don't know that there's going to be a huge increase on the monitoring costs. It's going to be figuring out the administration of the JPA, how many times they're going to meet, because it costs money to get people together to meet, have a council that responds to that. You know, as you guys know, when you create a JPA, there's all kinds of new requirements for financial reporting and things like that. So how much is San Joaquin County going to take on of that, and how much is going to need to be funded by all the GSAs is a question that I anticipate is going to be talked about.
And what kind of funding do we have available?
Nothing. So, you know, again, we have four agencies in the East Side Groundwater Sustainability Agency at this time. We've heard that at times like the county is more than willing to step up and contribute something. So, you know, again, we need to consider the fact that we'll have other agencies.
Also, it's important to recognize that the county is responsible for all of
Right,
that.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Is there any discussion being, we talked about monitoring wells, how are they looking at the expansion of the nut industry, you know, as far as taking water out? I mean, they're not monitoring all these new wells, I presume.
Not yet.
Not yet, but I mean, you could do a mathematical calculation just based on, you know, on acreage being in production. I'm sure they have the math for that, but are they gonna do anything like that? I mean,
Yeah, so
it's
there's
kind of pointless if they don't keep track of,
new wells, yeah.
well, new acreage in production is what, yeah.
Yeah, so that goes into the total model that's being developed for the basin-wide approach. So I think we had some earlier presentations where we talked a little bit about that model. That takes into things like consideration of land use, and also there's some reporting that's going to have to go into it about extractions. And then they use satellite data, which is somewhat imperfect, but so there'll have to be some ground truthing on that. And then, you know, the larger ag districts, they have to do what's called the agricultural water management plan, very similar to our urban water management plan we do. So they're going to be reporting on 5-year increments through those on new crop acreages, new water usages. And then, you know, alternatively, there's a lot of projects that are going to go forward. They're listed in the plan as implementation projects. They're going to go forward either way. And a lot of those are associated with these districts, especially in the valley, know that they have to become more efficient and have more conservation measures. So things like lining canals, recycled water projects, and things like that are going to be coming into play.
Using surface water, I mean.
Yeah, and exactly. Switching surface water at certain times. Long-term, a lot of them are already thinking about conjunctive use. You've seen what's going on with East Bay Mud and North San Joaquin. They're coming up with ways to utilize surface water during certain timeframes and then pull off groundwater when things are perhaps in a different situation. So there's some banking going on. I anticipate in the next 20 to 40 years that's going to become more routine across the entire Central Valley. And people are just going to have to work smarter and then if they want to expand agricultural use. But yeah, I think so getting back to the wells, as part of the plan, there's a monitoring plan, and there's a set of 11 wells that were included in the plan. And so those wells are being proposed to be monitored long-term as part of this plan to check in and see how we're doing on things like, you know, chronic lowering of groundwater levels and things like that. Some of them are purposefully next to rivers. So you want to make sure that you're checking out impacts to surface water bodies. If people have, you know, drawn down groundwater in certain areas, you want to know where water's being pulled. If you're perhaps drying up the riverbed in certain places, you know, a lot of times a model, as we've talked about on several occasions, is really imperfect, but you kind of have a good idea of where streams are gaining and where they're losing. If you have these wells next to a river, you can make a better assessment of, you know, if all of a sudden everybody's pulling on it, are they making the river a losing stream where, you know, surface water levels are declining, or is it gaining in those, you know, or making a gaining stream turn into a losing stream, I suppose. So, yeah, there's a lot to be talked about with monitoring long term, but for the purposes of this plan, there's a proposed network of wells that are being proposed. And then also, there's a grant that was applied for to bring on 3 more wells too as well.
The presentation that Peter mentioned before, that where Walter Ward came to talk to the Moke River Association, Walter is a highly skilled and trained hydrogeologist. At one time, he was the deputy general manager of Modesto Irrigation District. So his qualifications are really quite impressive. But I never heard anybody quite summarize it like this. He just stood up there and said that the Sigma is, without a doubt, the most impactful water legislation that the state of California has seen in, what did they say, 100 years?
Yeah.
And he followed that without hardly taking a breath. He says that he sees the very distinct probability that 500,000 acres of acreage of cropland in the Central Valley will have to be fallowed, because they're using water that they never were really entitled to use, and now the chickens are coming home to roost, I guess. But
When Sigma was first passed, I think it was in 2014.
Yep.
I heard at an Aqua conference presentation, an attorney was given a lunchtime, it was a keynote speaker, talking about the 1914 water rights legislation this is the monitoring surface water, and in California, it's been 100 years later, they decided to start monitoring groundwater. It was a 100-year gap, and it was going to be major legislation, and here we are 5 years later, and it is a big deal.
Yeah, we have a couple attorneys in the room, and the biggest fundamental thing associated with groundwater has always been that groundwater has always been viewed as being attached to property. It's a property right. It's the land over the groundwater. So, whereas, with water rights, it's typically a permit to access water from a stream. So there's
in California. Yeah.
It's a fundamental difference. Yeah, if you go to other states like Utah, you get, they really manage, or other parts of the Colorado Basin, they really manage how groundwater is used. You get an allotment associated with your land. And that's that. So they're a little more particular. So as I mentioned, the comment period closed last Sunday. 19 individual comment letters were received from a variety of entities, including NGOs and state agencies, as well as 3 were received from GSAs within the basin as well. So if you remember, there was a period where the GSAs were given an advanced copy of the groundwater sustainability plan. The hope was that a lot of those comments would be addressed before it went out to the public, but obviously there still was an opportunity to provide comments by those groundwater sustainability agencies. So for our purposes, we did provide comments during the period that wasn't during the public comment period. So, and then those comments are going to be presented at the September 11th Board and Advisory Committee meeting. It's kind of already been discussed that there may need to be a separate ad hoc committee to address all those comments, which could be a substantial effort. So those have to be addressed, and perhaps a revised version will go out at a later time based upon that before adoption in November and December.
So you said that September 11th will be the ad hoc meeting, but is there a date certain for the reconvening of the JPA?
So I'm sorry. So yeah, that would be both the board, the JPA board, and the advisory committee will be talking about that on September 11th.
Okay.
So, before our board meeting, or not hitting daylight savings time yet, are we?
Not yet.
Yeah.
The Bertha rule.
The Bertha rule.
I just wanted to give you a quick update on the individual Eastside GSA activities. On August 8th, staff and one elected met in Stockton regarding our MOU. Michael, myself, and Dave Cameron were present at Downey Brand's offices. We met with staff from Stanislaus County, and Dennis Mills was there too as well. One of the things was talked about is sort of where do we go with our existing MOU structure. It was a very loosely created MOU structure just to get us to a point where we could claim ourselves as a GSA formally and move forward there. And then so we recognize that there may need to be some modification on that in the future. However, we're going to have to work on that over the next few months. Probably best not to make those changes before the adoption of the groundwater sustainability plan. So just to anticipate that those will be coming forward. So that's all I got. So happy to take any questions.
Any questions? Any questions from the public? Okay. Seeing none, how about board reports and information, future agenda items?
How about the
General Manager? I keep jumping ahead.
I know.
My bifocals need to be focused.
No
General
offense
Manager, you
taken.
want?
No offense taken. So just a couple of quick updates. I feel like the last board meeting was just a few days ago. Is it just me? So I don't have a lot to report, even though there's a lot going on. Maybe that's why it feels that way. But Moke River Association meeting was already mentioned. I thought it was a really good presentation by Walt. And I think the people in the room there really needed to hear what he had to say. So I felt like that was very timely. And then we followed up last week with a camera meetings. Many of those same agencies, many of those same people came together and had a good discussion about the purpose and the future of camera. Couple of just quick legislative updates. SB1 is probably the hottest topic right now, and that's the bill that the California State Legislature is trying to lock in place environmental and labor restrictions prior to the Trump administration. And so federal changes to those restrictions wouldn't take effect in California, essentially. Yeah, and from the main concern I'm hearing from water agencies and mountain counties is really involved in this. Aqua's involved in it. Is there's concerns about that approach in general, but I think the focus of the advocacy effort at this point is that it doesn't just lock statutory provisions in place, but also permit requirements. So if the Fish and Wildlife agencies, if the Natural Resources agencies, if new science comes along and they decide to change determinations or change permit conditions, that would potentially be prohibited by this legislation, and you want agencies to have that flexibility at a minimum. So there is a pretty vocal advocacy effort afoot to try to, at a minimum, amend SB1 to change those provisions of it. There's a couple of different proposals for new water bonds, as we haven't had one for a whole year now, I think. And so we're keeping a close eye on that. I think we'll participate in Aqua's. Aqua has just assembled a water bond working committee. There is still a possibility that a water bond proposal would be adopted by the legislature in this session, which is only got a few days left. So I think the first meeting of that group is tomorrow to get an update on new developments and try to propose or agree on proposed amendments if it looks like it's going to move forward, although it could be something that it gets kicked into next year. That is really it for me.
Is there anything to report on the PG&E settlement?
PSPS.
No, on the
PSPS or the settlement?
No, the PG&E settlement.
Nothing to report at this
Okay.
point. I have checked in on that recently, and it's just working its way through the process. There's still some time before it'll resolve.
Okay. All right, now we can go to board reports. Bertha, do you have anything to report?
Oh, okay. Well, Michael attended the White Pines Park Committee meeting, and
I forgot to add that to my report.
oh, okay. You're looking at a general manager that walks on water as far as the White Pines Park Committee is concerned. They really like the fact that the GM came and addressed all of the issues down there and gave them a heads up on what was happening. I just heard from Jesse that we're gonna be cutting down about 12 trees down in the White Pines area, and there's several more that are gonna be coming down. He can see the burr, or what do you call them, the little holes that the bug has done?
Yeah, where the bark beetle or.
Yeah, the bark
in the
beetle
tree.
on several others, so it's gonna be quite extensive as we go along. I picked up, does every director get the CSDA book? I flipped through it and read it thoroughly, and what a great little magazine this is. Filling us in on, the fact that we can all go to a conference, all 5 of us, and engaging community and heat illness prevention training. And here was one that I thought was great. For CSDA, they have a contest for the best videos, and those videos are prepared by either high school or maybe JC, talking about some part of the water agency that they're familiar with, and so we had to find out what we could do as far as getting one of the, I'm sure Bret Hart or Calaveras High would be really interested in putting together a video about an aspect of the water district.
And we have some singers that could lay down some tracks for it as well. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, no, and get recognition for CCWD. I think it's a wonderful idea. Hope everybody else is nodding their head, yeah. That's great.
Right on that, Bertha.
Get a memo out.
That's it.
Director Radaman?
I have nothing to report.
Cindy? Yes.
Just to let everybody know, the Highway 4 meetings are gonna start meeting. The next one will be next Thursday on the 5th. I may have told you this already, but we're gonna meet quarterly, and it'll be the first Thursday, the last month of that quarter. So,
The first,
sounds confusing, but it's really. I attended the camera meeting a week or so ago. I was Bertha's alternate, and I was really impressed with how that was handled. Scott, you did a good job. And I was so much impressed that I talked with Michael afterwards to see if we couldn't maybe get the Highway 4 group a little bit more, not structured in the JPA or anything like that, but kind of follow what took place there at the Highway 4 meeting to see, are we relevant? Do we need it? Do we, whatever. And so at the next meeting, I think we're going to talk about that a little bit. And we have some suggestions about the MRA.
I'm looking forward to that discussion, because I think the Highway 4 committee could use some of that, and I think MRA might be a better model for that group. Host a quarterly event at the hotel, and different agencies take their turn hosting or something along those lines, and make it a little bit more of a robust and structured discussion.
Right. So I'm gonna go to the next MRA meeting, just so I can, get on that. But anyway, it was really good, I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
For asking me to go. And then, the IRWM, we didn't have a JPA meeting, but at the WAC group, we, updated the group on the DAC technical assistance proposals, where UMRA and, UMRAMAC and TSTAN will be merging a project, so the WAC group approved that, and somebody's working on it. And, we also looked at the, water and wastewater section of the DAC involvement plan that we've been working on, and approved that. And then most of the meeting, we ground-proofed our SPIT program, as a stormwater project tool. So they laid out all these maps, and we had and the maps were identified with which areas, perhaps what kind of soil they were, if they were more prone to flooding, and how that area could be used. So we all walked around and made our notes on the maps, and CCWD, Peter did his kind of offline. So that was kind of cool. And then one other thing, MSD is posting tomorrow, you'll see it. It'll be a ordinance change amendment that has to do with the rate schedule and accessory dwellings. So if somebody says, oh my gosh, MSD is changing their rates, we are not. It's just, we're adding accessory dwelling in the rate structure. But the attorney felt that we should post that anyway, so if anybody has, still staying $60 a month, and that's all I have.
Okay. Director Davidson.
I just have a couple. I'd like to get an update on our public notice costs and whether or not we have a current contract. I'd like to review that. Also, maybe even have a discussion about, whether it's still a requirement or whether it can be done, if it still has to be print media, if there are any alternatives to our public notice.
So are you referring to public notices for board meetings or for public hearings, things that we put out in publication? Okay. It's interesting you bring that up. We've had some staff discussions about that over the last couple of days as well. So I'll follow up with you on that.
Okay.
Is that all?
Yep.
Okay. The only thing that I want to talk about is last Tuesday, I had an invitation to go talk to a civic-minded group down at Saddle Creek, and I asked Joel and our general manager to go along, and it was really some interesting exchange, give and take, and I think that we answered a lot of questions that the folks that were confused about. I kind of got the impression that they were trying to evaluate the current activities and leadership of CCWD compared to what they encountered 15 years ago or so, and that was back when you were a kid. And they like us better now. I don't know why that is, but took a long time. Yeah. But I don't know, I think that it's really a worthwhile activity, that we should do more of that type of, I don't know, it wasn't exactly a coffee clutch, but there was coffee and dessert and that, cookies and stuff. But I'm sure that they went away from that meeting talking to their friends and neighbors, and if somebody had a beef about CCWD, they might have been inclined to say, well, wait a minute, we've talked to those folks and they're not as bad as you think they are. So I felt good about it. It was pretty enjoyable. So with that, we have next board meetings. The next one will be Wednesday, September the 11th at 1 o'clock. And then following that, we'll have Wednesday, September 25th at 1 o'clock. Not until much later do we vote at 9 o'clock.
The Bertha rule?
Yeah, the Bertha rule. Okay, now the next item is a closed session, and I would like to propose that we have the 9B first on our closed session agenda, if you don't mind, so we can not keep Michael and the employee waiting longer. Is that okay?
Yes.
I have a question though, are we going to give him his performance review today, or are we going to discuss it and give it to him at another date?
I think it's a closed
So
session item.
for closed session items at this point, we should just announce them and go into closed session. We can do the agenda within closed session at that time.
Okay. All right, we will be going into closed session without having made any decisions, and we'll be back to report out.
You don't need to read them. You don't need to read what they are.
I'm going to read them. Yeah, we have a conference with legal counsel about anticipated